So while we're getting situated here, I'd like to actually ask the three supplier side folks here if they could just give a quick description of what they were effectively doing in the context of the presentations we heard. That would be very helpful. And we can just start with you, Sandy.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Sandy Mangad. Work for ThoughtWire. We've been working with Oxford Properties probably for a bit over a year now. Put really simply, we do operations performance management for built environments. So that's things like smart buildings, but it can also be smart hospitals or really any built space. We worked with ThoughtWire, as Lachlan mentioned, to really help them bring together all of their different subsystems within their building and start building the foundation of the digital twin and get them to a place where they become more digital twin enabled so that they can then enable those use cases around workplace experience and just overall removing friction from the lives of the people that work within their environment. So whether that's the operator that's managing the building or it's the occupants that are, trying to control their space or feel more connected to their space.
Thanks, Andy. I'll use this one. Hi, I'm Gary Chandler from QIO. QIO's mission is to liberate the industrial engineer. We've been working with Rolls-Royce since about 2015, middle of 2015. And really our role there has been to bring the technology in, but apply that in such a way that it's really focused on the end user, that industrial engineer. We're a company who have all been industrial engineers and all been frustrated in that role over many, many years. And really what Rolls-Royce uses for then is an accelerator, an enabler. And because of our domain expertise, our background in there, working with subject matter experts, we can be translators and bridge the gap between what the real business value is and then what the applicable technology is. We then transfer that knowledge across over onto the end clients, such as Rolls-Royce, and hopefully leave them sort of self-service and they can maintain the services as they go forwards. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Nathan Linder. I'm co-founder and CEO of Tulip, and we've been working with Dentsply for 2 years, I believe now, about 2.5 years. One of our very early customers, and I would actually go as far as defining them as our development partners. Our platform is really born out of watching what people do on production lines, and the realization that people on production lines are not knowledge workers in the sense that we think about ourselves today. We all drive these fancy supercomputers that have excellent ubiquitous interfaces in our smartphones and tablets and whatnot, and we make our decision based on data. That's not the reality of what's happening on shop floors, and especially in complicated shop floors, like in the Dentsply case. What we've done with Dentsply is, I think, in a short sentence, kind of explain what our product does, which effectively allows folks who are manufacturing engineers to create manufacturing applications without writing code. So it's a no-code approach. Applications are great because they're visual and they collect data and they can be, that data can be analyzed and create a feedback loop. But in their case, it's sort of if you ever see their process, it's like you really cannot, I think, in a reasonable way, write enough software to make it useful because there's just so many permutations in their process, and that is also very dynamic. So we brought this approach that kind of takes the classic manufacturing stack, flips it on its head, and puts the emphasis on the person on the shop floor that has the most context. And that's what we're excited for and interested in.
Okay, so any questions out here? Anyone? We'll start. Looks like we've got one up front.
Hello, my name is Jose Rivera. I'm the CEO of CSIA, Control System Integrators Association. My question is regarding the workforce. So we've seen examples about how you have been able to implement some training and progressive migration of your people to adopt more of this digital transformation. But there will also be cases where you just cannot make it happen. And so what will happen to those people in your organizations? Is it enough to do it through normal attrition, retirement, or do you just need to force them out?
Who wants to take that one?
I think that when we think about the real estate space, we certainly have a variety of people that are operating our buildings. And so they range in age from 20 years old to 65 years old, 65 plus. I think we have to continually work with our people to learn how we can make their lives easier. And I think that people will naturally choose to eventually leave. Generally, I think around when they retire. I don't think people will be leaving our organization because of technology. I don't think that's the nature of how they will respond to it. I think that it behooves us to support them through training, through education, through relating it to their function, and making sure they understand how to use it in a way that makes their lives better. So if we can use technology for simplification, and that alone, I think that's a critical step that our employees will accept. We find people are challenged by technology, but I think that most people are willing to try and learn. I've not met anyone from an operator's perspective who outright rejected it.
If I can add something that we're seeing, so a lot of times when I meet manufacturers, people talk about reskilling and how do we improve a workforce. And the fundamental thing that I've seen is that people really want to do a good job. Like it's fairly easy to understand if somebody doesn't want to do a good job. You honestly don't need a lot of technology to do that. The problem is how do you create a culture? And I think Dan touched on it, and as well in Jonathan's presentation. I love the plant manager, the curious plant manager example, because the hard part we're seeing is that it's really difficult to measure people. People are actually very bad at measuring people. We're subjective. We have good days, we have bad days, and that kind of stuff. And that's again, I'm just going to call it intelligence, not artificial intelligence. But what happens with our intelligence is that when we are shown objective data, that we have trust in it, and trust in it folds in, I think, both how the information was collected, and you can think about it from technology, but also the culture, then we improve. And I think one simple canonical example from consumer land, which I spent some time in, it's if anybody drove a Prius, it kind of tells you when you get better, and with time you start trusting that machine to tell you how to. Same thing applies when you push that into people on production lines, and they start gamifying the process. They start doing a better job because they want to almost beat themselves, or they want to be better team members. And I think that's a fundamental sort of component of how you really change what you do, to help your workforce.
I just add something that, obviously this isn't a new problem. Business has to go through change all the time. And if you look at one of the things that we did when we introduced Lean, we had to get the workforce, we had to get the experts in terms of the operations to embrace that. And do that in a way where they thought they weren't making themselves redundant. What they were doing was making their experience at work richer. And I think Dan touched on that. That what we have to demonstrate here is that this technology is just another level of toolkit that can allow them to improve their focus on where they're really adding value, and make that sort of cross-skill and upskill a much richer experience for them. Which was something that was harder to do before because they didn't have the bandwidth. They were so caught up in trying to go through the processes. But it's a really important cultural aspect, as you know, and it's not something that is new, and there's many businesses out there that are dealing with it.
And I'll just add to that because somebody who often has to deliver news or put in perspective to people about a glass maybe not being as full as they think it is. I'm convinced that there have been instances where you've seen us move just culturally through transformational processes from, agrarian to industrial, for example, and we're still here because humans are very adaptable. I believe it's important that you also don't sweep change under the rug, and you don't sugarcoat everything to say that change is going to impact everybody positively, because there will be some attrition as we move to do things with systems and machines that humans used to do. However, I think that one of the things that you can point to in terms of technological innovation and software-based technological innovation, it allows people who wouldn't typically be involved to become much more creative than they ever could be. So you unlock possibilities in people. So what somebody may have done can be replaced, and then that person and the talents associated with that person can then be reapplied somewhere else. And that's one of the things that I think we undersell, because I do believe that will be a case where you look at just efficiency with engineers, for example. If you could look at an engineering, any typical industrial engineering job, and you could just say, wave a magic wand and tell me, if I could strip out all the fat, how much time would that be? And you ask that engineer, what would you do with that time? You're going to get answers, and those answers are going to be beneficial. And now you can use technology for them to, it is the supercharging of the human brain, where they can do things and think of things that they just simply couldn't before. Or maybe they always wanted to, but they just never considered because it wasn't realistic to do. I do think we will transition into a period where that will start to occur.
Can I just add, if I might? So there are a couple of things that I forgot to mention one person in my presentation who we celebrated his 25th year a couple of months ago in Rolls-Royce, and he had a very nice watch. But the interesting fact isn't that. The fact is that 25 years ago, he started as a cleaner on the shop floor. He's now a data scientist with a PhD in maths. And if people like that can transition, then anybody can transition. It's what you want to make it. But there's a word of caution, and I think Gary mentioned about the lean journey that many companies have been on. That there's an ability through bad behavior of management to abuse that journey. And you can turn the digitalization journey into a journey of reduction in headcount and disinvestment in human capital. And the important point is that there will be companies out there that will do that, and probably those are not the companies you want to go and work for. But that can happen. And it probably will happen. The thing is that, as I said at the beginning of my presentation, that everybody can go out and buy the tech, but they can't go out and buy the people, and that's the differentiator. So you really do have to take care of your people, invest in them, encourage them, and emancipate them to learn.
Also, I'm going to add to that too, because this is a very important, I think, conceptually to answer that. I'm also convinced that you'll start to see a shift in what is a good leader. To your point, Jonathan, that as worlds become more digital, it doesn't matter whether it's consumer-based or industrial, but I think in industrial you'll see it manifested more starkly. Leaders have always been characterized by how well they do with risk, in terms of either minimizing it or just simply eliminating it, and that's given them the steadiness to which through which they can monetize the business more effectively. In a digital world, as I mentioned before, it's speed and agility. So risk is always going to be a piece of the pie, of course, because of the nature of the business. But what you're going to really start to see is great leaders will be all about their ability to identify an opportunity and galvanize the organization to really capitalize on that with speed. And then you're going to start, I think, to see a new level and a new layer of leaders emerge that will have fundamentally different characteristics than what we're used to. Anyone else? Mike?
Mike Dudzik, ArcelorMittal Dofasco. So for the panel, when you're at the early stages of digital transformation, you obviously recognize that people were going to be very critical, the culture, you're going to have to make changes, the change management of their roles and responsibilities. Tell me quickly, what was the role of your HR department, and how did that work out from them at this early stage, or did they cause more grief?
You stole my closing question. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised.
I'll start this one. HR had no involvement.
Yeah.
They weren't involved from the beginning. They didn't really care what we were doing because ultimately we weren't changing much of what the operators were doing. We were just digitizing them and being able to collect that data in order to better the process. Some of the things that we learned about were that we had some operators that were faster than others in the same operation. Well, why? How? What were they doing? So we found steps, we found specific areas that they were faster at and started to look at that in depth. But there was no change in personnel. The only involvement that HR ever kind of got involved in was when we started cross-training and moving people to different departments from, say, production control to titanium manufacturing. Those are two separated departments, but now we're cross-training and bringing them across those lines. So that's really where they get involved.
So I'll go the opposite way on that one. So HR, in our case, are really involved. They are a key sponsor of the Digital Academy, and actually they have a responsibility to support that, and that fits in with their strategy also. They also have resources around the learning and development capability that we pull on to create the learning material, to engage with universities, to carry out sponsorship of doctorates. But fundamentally, they also have, so HR is a key departmental function that exists on the ELT. So we have top level sponsorship in that zone. And to the point that, at the beginning of January, we put the top 80 managers through Agile workshop, a 4-hour Agile workshop, which was interesting because we have a real spread of understanding there, from guys who are quite savvy in digital to guys who struggle to put an app on their iPhone. So it's important that we use that capability that HR has got to open those doors and make things happen.
Okay, so I think we're going to have to wrap here in terms of time. So just a couple of things. What I want to express, because I've been talking about this all week long, is there is a massive range of how people are coming at this represented here. But as you can see, there is at the center of it all is people. And integrating people into the process is really absolutely critical to any kind of digitalization, digital transformation, digital initiative. So I want to thank everybody for coming up here and telling us some great stories. Thank you very much for attending. We do appreciate it. And I believe I got the time wrong for the buses going to the party tonight. It's 6:45, but it's in the app. But I know that that's important, so I just wanted to reiterate that. Thank you very much.